What is up, YouTube? My name is Trinity and welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you've been here before. Today we're going to be continuing the case we were talking about in the previous video, the disappearance of Johnny Gosch. Now, in the previous video, I wanted to talk more about the odd circumstances that led up to his disappearance and the actual abduction itself. Today, however, I am going to be talking more about the case itself, the effort to find Johnny or at least solve the case of his disappearance. And that's a little bit difficult for this case just because there weren't a ton of actual breakthroughs. Once Johnny was taken, the case kind of went cold, and you can blame that either on just how coordinated and quickly this kidnapping happened, or you could also blame it on unprofessional police work, or a whole multitude of things, really. I'm probably going to cover maybe theories of what happened, because there are a lot of theories of different people being involved, what really happened, and things like that, or who Johnny could actually be today if he's still alive. I'll probably cover that in a video later on, just because I do want to break up these videos because there are other things that I do want to talk about on my channel. So picking up on where we ended last time, Noreen collected dozens of statements from different witnesses to piece together what exactly happened to Johnny the morning that he was taken. And she did this all before the police even showed up at her house, despite the police station they were coming from only being 10 blocks away. And when the police actually got there, they immediately started pushing the idea that Johnny was nothing but a runaway and that they weren't really concerned about it. When they left to go collect witness statements of their own, according to the people that they interviewed, they told Noreen that they didn't even bring a pencil. They didn't write down anything regarding their statements. They just came, listened, and left. And they didn't contact Noreen for 8 hours after initially coming to the house, and when they did, they just picked up a picture of Johnny to put on missing persons posters and left. So Noreen, as a mother, probably wasn't very impressed by their police work, and failures like this to take the case seriously and do their job properly continued throughout the entire case, which really could have cost Johnny his life. Johnny could be home right now, potentially, if they'd done their job correctly. I'm not saying that that definitely would have happened because, again, this was obviously a very organized kidnapping, and there were probably a lot of precautions in place for whoever took him so they wouldn't get caught, but who knows? But the shitty police work does not end there. No, folks, this is just the beginning of it. Chief of Police Orval Cooney actually told Noreen and John not to talk to the media and to stay home and not participate in any community searches for their child, which is kind of the opposite of what you would think would be the smart thing to do, since if you're talking on the television and talking to news stations and getting eyes on you, people are more likely to speak up if they did see something weird. And Johnny might just be in the back of their mind, so if they do see something that seems kind of out of place, or they do see someone that kind of looks like him or the kidnappers, that they might say something, and something might get done. But no, he told them to stay home. Obviously, they thankfully didn't listen. They were on all kinds of news programs, but that was shitty. Speaking of these community searches, yes, the community gathered together and they went out and searched for Johnny themselves. A drunk police officer came to one of these searches, stood up on a picnic bench, and started yelling at people to go home because Johnny was just a runaway. As I said in the last video, even if Johnny was hypothetically a runaway, that doesn't change the danger of a child being out on their own for several days or weeks or however long it was when this specific search was going on. And even if he was a runaway, that doesn't mean somebody else couldn't have taken him, or he couldn't get hurt or lost or whatever else. So I don't get that part, but also all of the evidence pointed to him being abducted. And it's things like this that go on throughout the case. The refusal to properly do their jobs, the telling the parents not to search, not to worry, pushing the idea that he was just a runaway and nobody should be looking for him. At best, it's shitty police work. At worst, it points to corruption. For a very long time, there were no breaks in this case. No suspects, no people of interest, no clues, nothing was found. In 1984, Johnny was one of the first missing people to have their face put onto a milk carton to raise awareness that they were missing or kidnapped. Interestingly, one of the other children that was first put on these milk cartons was that of Eugene Martin, another Des Moines, Iowa paperboy that had gone missing the same year under extremely similar circumstances as Johnny. In 1985, in Sioux City, Iowa, about 3 hours from Des Moines, a bill was received in a local grocery store with the message, "I'm alive, Johnny Gosch," written on it. The cashier at the grocery store had received this and reported it to police, but it was never confirmed whether it was legitimate or not. In 1988, the Gosches received a letter from someone claiming that they were indeed Johnny and that he had been kidnapped and his captors had forced him to do awful things. He said that his captors had also changed his identity, his appearance, just so he wouldn't be recognized, so he could never be found. Now, I'm personally unsure of the legitimacy of both the note on the dollar bill and of the letter, just because at the time, people were shockingly horrible to the Gosch family, especially Noreen. She rubbed a lot of people the wrong way for whatever reason. She was a very strong-willed woman when it came to this. Obviously, the police weren't doing much to help solve this case, so she had to become her own advocate. She had to fight for things to get done for her son to be found. So instead of coming off as what a lot of people would say the stereotypical, like, broken mother, she was very abrasive and straight to the point, and she wanted to force people's hands so they would do something, and that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. So much that some people would drive by the house and yell, "I hope your son is dead." So unfortunately, I believe that these could also just be some fucked up person or people just trying to get Noreen's hopes up that her son is alive, just for it to maybe come out later that he was dead the entire time. The biggest potential break in the case was in 1991 when a prisoner named Paul Bonacci came forward and said that he had participated in the kidnapping of Johnny Gosch and had actually chloroformed him that morning. Now, Paul is an interesting character. He was in prison for child exploitation. He was also the victim of the same crimes that he had committed from a very young age. This trauma early in life likely contributed to him developing DID, or dissociative identity disorder, which is where the mind kind of makes alternative personalities to shield yourself from the trauma you're experiencing. So it's like another person is experiencing it for you. But because of his own convictions and because of this disorder, a lot of people didn't think that he was a credible witness, but Noreen did. When he explained the series of events and the entire plan to abduct Johnny, it matched completely to what witnesses had said, down to him drawing an X to the exact last spot that Johnny was seen. He also revealed a lot of information about a multi-state trafficking ring that had dozens of collaborators that kidnapped and trafficked children. So in 1992, America's Most Wanted wanted to tackle the Johnny Gosch case, and they decided to talk to Paul Bonacci, who actually led them out to an abandoned house in Colorado where he and other children were apparently held captive. Beneath this house was an unfinished dirt basement where he and other kids were apparently held, and apparently in the walls were the initials carved by the children that were down there. And for whatever reason, police decided never to look into this house. They never investigated it to see if Johnny or any of Paul's claims were even true about the place. In 1997, Noreen was asked under oath by a judge if she had seen her son since he went missing, and because she was under oath, she felt the need to say that she had. Apparently, Johnny had visited her some years ago. She said in the middle of the night she heard insistent pounding on the door, and she went to go see who it was. When she looked out her door, there was a man standing there, and when she looked into his eyes, she knew it was Johnny. And as she looked at him, he said, "Mom, it's me, Johnny." With him was another man that she didn't recognize that Johnny chose not to introduce to her. She offered to call the police in order to help them, but he adamantly said no, that if his captors had known that they were there, that they would come back and kill him. He confided in her that he and other children had been trafficked all over the country, and that they had been forced to do illegal things in order to make it impossible for them to come forward themselves. She said that he stayed for a bit longer before telling her he had to go, and then he disappeared and she never saw him again. Now, I'm not sure about the legitimacy of this claim of Noreen's. It is said that over the years that she kind of fell down a couple rabbit holes, mainly from her grief, and that it's possible that this claim that she indeed saw Johnny could be completely fabricated. Now, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that's what some people believe, and that this may never have even happened. I will say that a lot of things she claimed that he said to her lined up with what Paul Bonacci. They were trafficked all over the country to be abused, that they would do illegal things so that they could not come forward to police themselves, lest they go to jail like Paul Bonacci did. By the way, I'm not saying Paul Bonacci was forced to do anything that he did that led to him getting charged and convicted with what he did. I'm trying not to say it because it's just gross, horrible stuff that I don't want to talk about on here. I'm just saying what she said, Johnny said, and what Paul said line up, but that could also point to a fabrication, but it could also be that it really was Johnny and he really was in the same ring that Paul was. I don't know. And then the last kind of major update is that in August of 2006, Noreen received an envelope of photos of young boys that were bound and gagged, and she is fully convinced that one of them was Johnny due to some birthmarks and other identifying marks that she saw in one of the photos. Now, I'm not going to show them on here just because whether they are fabricated, like I feel like I've heard said before, or real, I don't think the boys in those photos would want them shown. They are available on the internet if you want to try to find them yourself, but I personally don't want to show that on here. Now, where does that leave us? That's essentially the end of what we know. Do I think Johnny's alive? I don't know. He could be. He could not be. Most of the time when a child is kidnapped, within the first, I think, 72 hours, they are killed. However, if it was related to sex trafficking, then there's a good chance he could still be alive, or he could have died later. Some might think if he is alive, why wouldn't he want to come home? But then there's also probably a lot of trauma associated with whatever he went through, and going back to people who would scrutinize and want to know every single detail might not be appealing to him. So if he was able to get out of it, he might just want to, you know, live his own life away from his previous life, and I couldn't really blame him for that. And that is kind of the end of the Johnny Gosch case. I know a lot of people find unsolved cases very unsatisfying, and to a degree I understand. I do too. You want to know what happened. But I think that's kind of what has led this specific case to stick with me, just because there's so many unknowns. Was there corruption? Was there an entire group of people targeting Johnny and other boys specifically? Or was it a random one-off kidnapping and he was killed? I don't know, and I don't have the answers for you. But that's, I think, just why it's stuck, because there's so many questions still unanswered. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed. And be sure to watch my JonBenet Ramsey video. If you do enjoy true crime videos, I'm also going to be working on one regarding the illicit attorney case. But if you also like paranormal stuff, that is my main content, I guess, so I'm going to be working on more videos related to that, potentially on the topic of the Appalachian Mountains and what is supposedly living in them. So be sure to stick around for that. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.